Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on East Granby. Today's date is December 12th, 2009. Our guest tonight is Adolph Wesley Viets, an 82-year resident of East Granby, born in East Granby, and he's spent his whole life here. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight. We're going to go by Chic. That's what he's known as by people that know him, and let's get started. Okay, Chic, you were born in East Granby in February of 1927?
In September of
1927.
Correct.
So you're coming up on 83 years old.
I will be 83 next year.
Soon. Okay. You were born on a farm in East Granby on South Main Street.
That's
Why don't you
correct.
tell us a little bit about your memories of that, your early memories?
Well, I don't really recall much the day I was born.
Not the day you were born? No.
No.
We'll have to get another source for that one.
Fourth generation on the farm, born at the farm.
Okay.
My mother and father and grandfather and my grandfather and grandmother all live on the same farm at that time. I don't know what I can tell you about it, about growing up on the farm.
Your first memories were probably, what, 4 or 5 years old, around that age?
Probably
Yeah.
that age, yes. Nothing more stands out other than the chores. We all had chores.
A lot of work.
We were little kids.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest things that happened was in '38. We had a tremendous hurricane. The flood before that was in '36. I don't know if you're aware of that
Yeah,
one
a couple
or not.
rough years weather-wise.
Hartford.
Yeah.
But we had the hurricane, which affected us. It took everything down. We lost sheds, and trees, and all of that. And I happened to be out in it trying to get cows into the barn at 4 o'clock that afternoon. And I was only 10, 11 years old at the time.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you didn't have much warning, and it just got windier
Very
and windier.
little, very little.
To the point that the radio said, we've got a problem, and everybody started. I interviewed not on this show, but I talked to a plumber once who was driving around in his truck and noticed the trees started falling. And he realized it was about time to come home. So,
That's what happened. The trees were coming down. In fact, 2 of them came down on the farmhouse.
wow. That must be quite a memory
Yeah.
as a youngster. Okay, your family goes way back in East Granby.
Yes, it
So
does.
why don't we see if we can recollect some of your if you could frame out the family tree a little bit and give us some background on the Viets family.
Well, there are many, many blanks that I can't fill in for you.
Sure.
Going back just a couple of generations, my grandfather, Jason Viets, was the mailman postmaster here. Well, Wilcox was postmaster. The Wilcox General Store in town. That's been long gone.
That was right in the center, huh?
Right in the
Yep.
center. And he had the store and the post office.
Okay.
And Jason Viets was a mailman for many, many years, just about all his life in town. Single. One man did it all.
Yeah.
He'd sort it in the morning and go out and deliver it in a day. And
Yeah. A few less subdivisions then.
just a few hundred people in town at
Right,
that time.
right.
Back before that,
Now he must have done that by horse, right?
well,
was-
way back when he
Yeah.
first started, I know when I was a kid, I can remember riding around with him. He had an old Chevy car,
Right.
and I rode around with him as a kid on the mail route. Yeah.
So he was the postmaster, and going back further, you mentioned something about the original Viets. Why don't we start there and see how far we can
Well,
go?
I'm not that much on history,
No, we're not testing
so
you.
don't quote me. all
No,
right?
no, that's fine.
But the original Viets, as we have traced it back, was shipwrecked in New Amsterdam in a storm. Dr. John Viets.
Okay.
And we have all originated from that. He had 2 or 3 sons. And that's why there are 2 branches of Viets here in town, 2 different.
Okay, so it goes back to that.
It goes way
branching.
back several hundred years.
Interesting.
Right? the biggest problem I had going through life was when you apply for a job, you have to put down your mother's maiden name.
Right.
Her name was Viets. Can you imagine
the questions?
the questions that come up when your name is Viets, your father's name is Viets, and your mother's name is all.
Yeah, right.
But yes, her maiden name was Viets.
Yeah.
She is from one side of the Viets strain, and my father was from another.
So it kind of diverged.
It came around, and came back together here in town.
Yeah. Well, so he came. He ended up in New Amsterdam. Came up and settled in.
Settled in New York, so far as I know.
Okay.
I don't have the details are in the book. I have the book, but I haven't studied enough to quote everything.
Right.
But that's where we originated, and many years ago.
Did he come to East Granby? Do you know, or was it his sons?
No, probably his sons or grandsons.
Okay.
Now I don't know how far back it was, what he was to Captain John Viets, who was at Newgate, which everyone is familiar with.
Right,
during the war.
Is that a direct descendant of yours?
Yes.
The John Viets side of the. Okay. So he was the. He had a farm up there, and did he run the tavern there or the prison?
I don't know exactly who ran the tavern. It was known as the Viets Tavern.
The Viets Tavern. It's still there.
It's still there and still known as Viets Tavern. Been restored by the Historical Society. But actually, at that time, I don't know who. I have some articles that say who ran it, who was there all the time. I don't have them.
So that was actually a functioning tavern.
Yes, it was.
It was a stop.
Overnighter. It was a stop for the stagecoach.
Interesting. And that was. Do you know roughly what years that was in existence? Or?
No, I couldn't say.
Okay. So that was, and that was the original line of the family that you came from. Mm-hmm. Any other family members or that you mentioned or names you remember from your say your uncles and your father's name was
Adolf. I'm Adolf Jr.
Okay.
Yes.
Your mother's name was
Maisie.
Maisie.
Lolita Maisie.
Do you remember their brothers and sisters? Any of your uncles or aunts?
She had one sister, Lolita.
Okay.
And she had a brother, Morgan, who had a very large family, and they live in Suffield. There's two of the children, I believe, that passed on, but there's still several scattered around in various places in Suffield.
Okay. So part of the family settled up in Suffield.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty close to where the Viets property in the north side of town must maybe so that was the other branch of the family.
Yeah, they weren't related.
They weren't related.
No,
interesting. Okay.
Not closely.
Right.
You know, you get back beyond third, fourth cousin, something like that. I figure they're not related anymore.
You lose track of the connections, actually. Yeah. So you were raised on the farm on South Main Street, 201. You said South Main Street.
I am 201.
201. Okay.
The farmhouse was at that time we had no street numbers.
Yep.
I don't know what it would be or what it is now. We haven't owned it for many years. I'd guess it's up around 180, something like that.
Okay, in that general vicinity.
Yeah.
So you built the house on a part of one of the pieces of property.
Right. My father they deeded the property to me so I would have it under my own name. 3 acres, actually, a corner of one of the
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a sister, Sister Eleanor. She's out in Iowa. She lived here for many years, married, and moved to Iowa, bought a farm out there, and
interesting. Yeah.
Doing very well, very large farm out there.
So she stayed in the business.
She stayed in farming.
Okay, so now you were raised on the farm. You went to school in East Granby. What were the early?
That's interesting.
Okay.
All right. I went to school in this what they call the South School. If you're familiar with it, it is now
The thrift shop?
the thrift shop.
Okay.
A little one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
We had 7 grades, 1 through 7 in that school.
Right.
18 students total, 1 teacher. And she taught all the grades and did a darn good job at it. I think I'm fairly well educated.
Yeah.
In fact, I can add and subtract better than most of the kids today that are behind all the computers. And
Right.
without their equipment, they're lost.
That tends to be the case.
I'm sorry, I'm a little...
Yeah. Yeah, well, you
But
benefited
anyway.
from a very traditional education. Advocate of it.
We walked to school
Yep.
1 mile from our farm
Okay.
to the schoolhouse.
Right.
Rain, snow, sleet, it didn't matter. You went to school every day.
Right.
I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, I was one of the larger children, strongest.
Yep.
So it was my duty to go to the farm next door, which was Crow's Farm, just beyond the school. Draw a pail of water and bring it back. That was our water for the day. We had no running water or anything in the
No
school.
modern plumbing in that school, huh?
So we had what they call a cooler, which we filled every morning.
Now, the Crow Farm, was that Larry Crow? Or is that the son of...
Larry is the son. Theodore Crow owned the farm at the time,
Okay.
and he had 3 sons.
Right.
Teddy, which is Theodore, Teddy, Howard, and Leonard.
Leonard. Okay, right.
And Leonard had a son, which is Larry.
Okay. All right. So it was quite a
Right.
few crows.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a few in town.
Yeah.
So you have... so you went to school there through what grade?
1 through 7.
Through 7th grade. And then what happened? Because I know there was
Then-
no...
All of the 8th grade was taught at the center school,
Okay.
which is now a
Daycare.
daycare center.
Right.
It was the library for many years.
Okay.
After school. When they built the first high school here, then everybody went to that.
So you went there for 8th grade.
You went there for 8th, and
One
then
grade.
we were bused for the 4 years in high school, 9, 10, 11, and 12, to Simsbury.
Okay.
So we'd catch the bus in front of the house in the morning, take us to Simsbury, pick us up after school, and bring us back.
And the Simsbury, you had... were there other towns that went to Simsbury or just East Granby?
Well, I think it was East Granby. Suffield had their own. Windsor had their own.
What about Granby?
I don't recall if Granby went to Simsbury. I think they did.
Yeah. Because they were a fairly small town at the time.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed it?
As much as you enjoy school,
That's
all right? I enjoyed the sports.
Right.
I did enjoy some of the subjects. I love math. I'm very good at math. So
Okay.
I went along in that.
So you take, let's because you have such a length of experience with the town, what would you say, if you were to describe the town back then, what was the biggest difference that you've seen, biggest change you've seen over the years? I mean, obviously there's a lot more people.
Yes, it has grown from farming instead of industry. It's gone into a bedroom town.
Right. Like
Right.
almost every other town in the valley.
Surrounding towns have gone heavy in industry, such as Windsor and Bloomfield
Right.
and so forth.
That's true.
But East Granby hasn't. I don't know the reason for it, and I won't get into the politics of
Yeah.
it. But that's one of the big things, and that's what's made such a large school system now, which of course affects your taxes,
Right.
which is a big thing from the time that I first started paying property taxes to today is tremendous.
Yeah. That's an unfortunate modern issue in every town, I think. I think they've kept them reasonably low in this town, considering what some of the other towns. I know Granby's substantially higher. But you have, like 20 or 30%, if
Yeah.
I'm not correct. If I'm correct, the the growth in the town. What are your memories of the town? You had a general store in the center. You had
Our center was made up of the general store, which is W.A. Wilcox's post office in the store. Across from the store was Rozier's blacksmith shop, which
you
hasn't
still
been
had a
there.
blacksmith. Wow.
Two big elm trees and his small blacksmith shop sat there for many years. It's been gone probably 50 years or more. So most people in town don't even know there was anything there.
Right.
It's now the parking lot for J&G's.
Okay. On the
All right.
Really? No kidding. Wow.
And right across from that was our first firehouse.
Right.
The A&W garage, which Woodworth wound up owning, was Adams and Woodworth.
Okay.
And Adams got out and was Woodworth. The N Bay was our firehouse. It housed our first fire engine.
Yeah.
We had one fire engine, 1929.
Right.
I got in it in 45.
Volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I guess you almost had to have most of the able-bodied men as part of the department if you were going to actually field the department.
I think there were, I can name them.
Oh yeah, really? How many guys were there originally?
I believe there were 10 or 12
Okay.
men in the original, the charter members of the fire department.
What year was this again?
Well, their first truck was 1929.
Okay.
Now, before that, I don't know who or how or whatever.
Right. Couple buckets and your neighbors, I guess.
But you had the fire truck, general store, blacksmith shop, Prevost garage. John Prevost owned a Hudson garage right on the corner.
They sold cars.
They sold cars. Hudson's there. Woodworth sold Chevys.
Most people aren't aware of the extent of small franchised car dealerships that were in almost every town.
Every town had them, just about.
And sometimes several. A town with hundreds of people had 2 car dealerships.
We had
Pretty
2
amazing.
almost side by side, just one intersection between them.
Interesting. Wow.
There was a feed and grain store just up from that. Hayes owned that. And another store developed into a store, a market, right across from, well, let me see, what is it today? I've forgotten what it is as far as a building today. I believe it is where the appliance dealer is.
Oh, where contractors supply
Right.
or whatever I believe that's what they call
And
it.
dentist upstairs or something.
Yep. Yeah.
That back then was a general store, meat market, and that sort of thing.
Interesting. So it's a pretty congested little center there.
That was about it. Well, the small businessman across the street was Jim Miller, where the complex is now with all the small stores.
Right.
Was at one time a pretty large home and barns and business. Jim Miller, he sold electric stoves, refrigerators, that sort
That's
of thing.
interesting. Right across the street from Contractor Supply. Yeah. That's. So there was, if I'm picturing it properly, there was kind of a collection of smaller independent buildings that made up the center.
All right around pretty much in the center.
Right, right. The church was set off to the north of there.
Church set, actually northeast.
Northeast. Is that the church? Is that look much as it did in that day? Because the stonework had to be.
The church is the original. Exactly the same. Of course, all the additions change the shape,
Right.
the looks. It's been added on to the east, to the north.
It's a beautiful building.
They've got all the thing, everything inside of it now. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good picture of the town center. Did you have who were some of the? Do you remember any of the characters from town back then? Do you have any memories of some of the folks that lived around, or Any of your neighbors or
Which generation would you like?
let's start as far back as you can remember. Anybody from your youth, prominent people in town that you recall?
Prominent people, yes.
Or not so prominent?
Well, Leon Viets, L.H. Viets, who owned the farm that is now given to the, well, not given, but the
Right.
town owns. His father, C.P. Viets,
Okay.
formed the Connecticut Milk Producers Association. He was the head of that, which all of the dairy farms in this area was in, I believe.
Like a cooperative?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was pretty outstanding, and Leon was at his time, as far as being a broker, say, in horses and cattle and oxen, that sort of thing. And then his son took over, Ralph Viets, who is now passed on, but,
Right.
and Billy. They took over, and I don't know where they found the need for so many cattle, but they would buy and sell cattle right along.
Okay, so it's their business.
Yeah.
So, the silo is still there.
The silo is
Viets
still there,
Farm.
L.H. Viets and Sons. Yeah.
Yep. They've painted the bottom part of it pretty
Yeah.
elaborately. Anyway, so that whole part of the town was a farm then, and it's going to be open space forever,
The other,
which is great.
Other outstanding people that come right to mind is Dudley Seymour, which most people don't know, but they have the school in his name.
He's been brought up quite a few times on this show.
He was selectman for a long while. I worked for him when I was a kid. He used to
Did you?
shovel this type of weather. The way they took care of the roads was he got a dump truck filled with sand, which we loaded by hand, stood on the back of it, and spread the sand on the road as he drove down the road. That was the sanding equipment in town.
Right, so you manual spreaders.
So, yeah, I know Dudley well.
Yeah, he's...
And, well, possibly Kenneth Seymour, who owned Newgate Prison.
Oh, he
for a
owned it at one
while.
point? Really?
He rented it, had admissions for a long time.
Oh, so he ran his own little
Yeah.
museum type thing?
Yeah, he had
Interesting.
a few animals there. There was a couple of bears.
Really? So it was
Yeah, they had bobcat and foxes and stuff in the back, that sort of thing. Display inside the central building. If you've been into the building at
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
And he maintained on the second floor was some sort of a scene that he had put together. I don't recall what it meant, but there were subjects in it all the time.
Interesting.
Oh, that's a good point, too. People don't remember. We used the upper deck of that building for a lookout during the war. Plane spotters. I don't know
Really?
if you knew we had them in town or not.
Well, I know it was a lot. The civil defense, the air civil defense, was a lot more elaborate than I think most people are aware of.
Well, we had 24-hour surveillance, and that was where we started, was in the tower in Newgate Prison.
Really?
I happened to be on a night shift there myself on a Friday night, 8 to 12. And, you'd call in and you had a phone, direct line.
Right.
When you saw any airplane, where it was going, what direction, they took it from there.
Interesting. This is
And then they built one shortly after that on the hill right at where the intersection is now for Newgate Road and Holcomb Street.
really.
On the southeast corner, there's a pretty good bank.
Okay.
And right up on the top of that, which overlooks everything in town.
Right.
And we had a lookout center there for quite a while.
Interesting. That was. It always fascinates me because where would the planes come from? I mean, how could you get a plane?
I don't know whether they expected planes coming in from off the shore or from inland. I have no idea.
Well, they did have aircraft carriers then. I don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess they didn't really have. I mean, we take it for granted now. You can see everything from satellites. So, but there was a certain, sense that you were blind to what was coming back then, and you had submarines that came within, and actually attacked within the waters.
Everyone's job as a spotters was just to report anything that you saw flying,
Right.
day or night, what direction and approximate speed, if you in height and so forth.
Now, Bradley was functional at the time as a training.
Bradley started in 91, or 41, 1941.
Okay, all right.
And, they came in first with a couple of P-40s. That's how Lieutenant Bradley was killed.
Right.
In the P-40. I saw him go down.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, were you on spotting?
No, I was standing in the back of our barn at the time. My father was on duty. He would patrol on the field. He was there, but he said he didn't see him hit or anything. I did see the Hudson Lockheed. We've had several crashes.
Right.
One crashed in our tobacco field just east of our house.
Okay.
And we
These
saw,
are military planes?
These were military.
Right.
9 passengers on that, all killed.
Oh, wow.
And watched that one come down all the way. Wingtip folded up on him and he couldn't fly.
Yeah, what are you going to do then? Yeah, those were different days. A lot more.
Yep. But we have had many airplane crashes in town.
Okay.
Been,
Fortunately, not in a long time.
there hasn't been one for quite some time, no.
I know back probably 15 years ago or 10 years ago, there was a close call up on the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
One of the
Came in very low.
10 feet below the top of the trees, like
Took a few branches off.
Yeah, that would have been very unfortunate. But back in those days, planes were a little less reliable, and they were trying new stuff. And so that was a pretty exciting times during the war, huh?
Yes, it was. Yep.
A lot going on.
Well, a lot for us because most of my generation population was in the service and
Right.
gone.
Yeah. And they needed some farmers.
Yeah.
So you got...
Of course, we had rationing and all that, like everyone else,
Right.
Couldn't buy tires or gas, or you don't go out and have a good time because couldn't get there.
Right. Pretty stark life for a few years, but everybody was on the same team, too.
Yep.
It seemed like it was much more of a community effort to get the war won and get the guys home. You had so after the war, things probably picked up a bit after the war, even in East Granby, in terms of development and houses being built. And
things started, your factories were booming during the end of the war, and all the guys that were here, and women also, all went to work, getting good incomes at that time. But nothing outstanding comes to mind for, that time of year.
So you had, when you came off of, when you graduated, when the war ended, let's see, you were probably a teenager during the upper 1940.
I was 1940, in 45, when the war was just about over. I was 18 at that time. I tried to get into service, as I said, 18. They wouldn't take me.
Yeah. Well, you were at the tail end too. So you graduated from Simsbury High School. What do you do from there?
Back to the farm. Then I went to work very short at Harry Acker's Dairy in Simsbury, peddling milk. I would go there at 4 o'clock in the morning, get out at 6, load your truck and get out at 6, and be back by noon, and then go home and do my work on the farm.
It's a pretty full day.
I had a full day.
So you worked there for a few years, and what did you do from there?
Worked there until 49.
So you're 20 years old, or 20?
I was 22. I had been
years
married for 2 years. I got married when I was 20.
Why don't we include your wife in the conversation now? What was the?
She went to work at what was Command Aircraft, was just starting at that time.
Okay.
And she went to work as a secretary there, and I was working. I left there and went to work at Hamilton Standard.
Okay.
Because I had enough background, mechanical background and so forth, that they liked me at Hamilton. So I worked in a test house there for almost 10 years, 58.
What were you testing?
Propellers, IOCs, internal oil controls for, at that time everything was prop driven. There were no jets.
Right.
And they had the controls to change the pitch of the blades, the props and all of this, which is, we used to turn them around. They'd fly them in. We'd tear them off, turn it around, put them back on, all brand new and checked out, flying in 24 hours.
Wow, pretty efficient operation.
Right in the back of when Hamilton was over here, you know, when he first moved.
It's far more segmented now. You don't really pull the plane in.
But I left there. I had an opportunity to go with combustion engineering, which I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not.
Yeah.
So I went there when they first started out here, 58. And we had the first small style reactor built in Windsor in the Rappaport building.
Okay.
And then we actually had one. We went to, let's see, 57? 57 was the first one at combustion where they are now. They built building 1 and 2, and in building 1 they had a small, very small reactor. It's, I believe it was the S1C, which would be the first combustion submarine reactor.
Interesting, yeah.
And
so that was a fully nuclear powered submarine?
Yeah.
So that was,
that only went active just for a very short time, and then he shut it down. I was involved in tearing the whole thing out, getting rid of everything, because we built it up into a big test cell.
Okay.
100 feet high and very large for testing.
Did you, I think that's you in some ways you were making the rounds of the defense industry and the area in terms of your employment. There was there's not, I don't think this part of the state has ever fully recovered from that loss in terms of a guaranteed long-term employment. It's made, this is echoed through the country.
Yeah.
Where you have, but a lot of people, you could pretty much rely on a job in the defense industry in north central Connecticut.
You could.
For a good 50-year span.
Yeah.
Or 30-year span anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that was, many of the people we've had on the show have worked either at Pratt or Hamilton or Command. So that was a pretty exciting industry then. They were making a lot of headway, a lot of new innovation.
At that time, of course, nuclear power was fairly new.
Right.
In this area, anyway.
Right.
Most people, everyone was afraid of it and all of that.
Well, their whole perception of nuclear power was a mushroom cloud. So.
Well, that's about it.
Yeah, so that takes a little.
Afraid that everything's going to blow up if you have a power plant, nuclear powered.
Much of that was top secret, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had top secret. Let's see, my wife left and went to work there. She was a secretary there at combustion for, 20 some odd years.
So she went from command to combustion.
She went from command for a short stint at Hamilton, and then left Hamilton and went to combustion.
Oh, interesting. So you had, so those years you had children?
Yes.
Your children's names are?
Richard and Betty.
And what
son and daughter. Yeah.
What year were they born? Or years?
My son was born, we were married in 46, and he was born in 47. Didn't waste any time.
I guess not. Wow. So,
And my daughter was born
he's
in
almost a
50.
candidate for a guest on the show at this point.
He's 60. He'll be 62
Yeah, sure.
this coming year.
And he spent all his time in East Granby, or is he?
Yeah, he's still here. And so is my daughter, as a matter of fact. She's married, but she lives. I built a house next door, and she and her husband live next door to
Boy,
us.
the Viets really stick around, don't they? Yeah.
Well, I guess it's good country.
Yeah. Well, something agrees with you here. So, anyway, well, so you and they went to school in East Granby.
He did the same as I did. Well, he didn't go to the one-room school. Of course, they had the schools here in town. Yeah.
Right.
But, yeah, he and Betty both went to school here, graduated from here, and he went to, first he went to UConn, then he had a scholarship to UConn, but he wanted to work in Marine, so he went to Florida University.
Okay.
From that, he went into the Air Force. The Air Force couldn't keep him because his knees were bad. His knees went so bad he couldn't stand.
Right. They're pretty strict when it comes to.
Well, that ended everything. His sports career and everything. Well, to this day, he's bionic. He's got 2 new knees and hips.
Okay. Yeah.
But he stuck around. He went to work for the airlines. He's still there. He's been there 30-some-odd years.
American.
No, it's U.S. Air.
U.S. Air. Okay.
U.S. Airways. It was Allegheny way back when he first started, and changed name 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. So you and your daughter went to school in the same pattern?
She went to school here and then went to University of Bridgeport and graduated there as a dental hygienist.
Now, they were still sending the children to Simsbury at that point?
No, they had...
For high school?
They had the high school here.
Okay, so that was in the 60s.
In the 60s.
Early 60s, yeah. Okay, so where was that? Where was the first high school?
The first high school was the school right up... Let's see, where are we here?
We're in Granby.
Right.
It gets spun around a few times.
The first one is, I guess it's known now as the Elbow School.
That was a high school?
That was a high school to begin before they built the new high school where it is.
I got you. So you had your center school was your elementary school on School Street.
Yeah.
Good name for the street. Yeah. And then they'd go over to Algrove for senior high or junior and senior high?
For senior.
Senior high?
Let's see. I don't remember if the new high school was built before they graduated or not.
Right.
I know my son played basketball. Boy, it takes me back a while.
It's a few years ago.
He played basketball, and I think it was at the new school his last year in high school, and got his... Boy, I remember he's got his teeth knocked out. He had to have his teeth put back in again.
Okay. Well, he's had a rough career.
I think that was there, yeah.
New knees and new teeth knocked out. He's
been beat up.
Okay, so you had your children and you stayed in town. You built the house on your family's property.
I built a house on the end of our property. I built that by myself. Well, I had help. I had the cellar hole dug, and I had help now and then to put up some of the framing because I just couldn't handle it alone.
Yeah.
Took 2 years. I started building in *55.
Okay.
Built it in 2 years, my entire house.
So you had built your house and you put down your roots on your family property there. Now, obviously the area where your house is developed a bit, though. I mean, all those, even the houses down off Spoonville, those were all post-war houses, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a few farms down in there. And
There were well, down at Spoonville, there were 2 or 3 in the Spoonville area, and as you come up, Coles is a big white house at the top of the hill there at Spoonville Road.
right.
And There were a few scattered along, but mostly it was all farmland, and now it's all development.
Now, so that changed the town dramatically. I mean, the population surged into the thousands from hundreds, and all the town developed.
What we are now, 5,000 maybe?
Give or take, yeah.
I'm giving.
A little over 5,000, I think. So you have, now, just looking back, because you've been here such a long span, the biggest change then would be the growth and the transition from agriculture to a more of a bedroom community. What do you think the best change has been? What is it about?
The best change?
Yeah, what is it?
That's hard to say, really.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any one
specific
thing that would be the best change.
Let's take the other tack then. This is always, and I always preface this by saying that hindsight's 20/20. Is there anything you think the town could have done differently that you would, in hindsight, that would have been a good move at the time? We all, granted, the people who make the decisions do it at the time with the information they have. But you've been here a long time. Is there anything you would suggest could be done differently? That would. You mentioned development. But.
I'm very conservative.
Okay.
And that's why I'm no longer involved in town politics. At one time, after the '55 flood, we hadn't mentioned that, but
yeah,
Granby Park was wiped out in the '55 flood.
Some people lost their lives.
We lost one girl. We were trying to rescue all the families.
Was it one that passed away?
One, an invalid, and we dropped her.
Oh, okay.
Slipped and we lost her. That's the only one I'm aware of. There may have been another one, but not in the group that I was working with for rescue. And we capsized ourselves, Mike and I, my cousin Mike, and we were rescued the next day off the top of a house.
Oh, really? Oh, so you got tied up in the waters and had to grab onto a house yourselves? Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a experience, huh?
Yeah, it was hectic for a while.
Rough night.
But after that, I'll tell you a very odd one. It was interesting to me. The water had receded, was down, and we were looking at what we had to do to clean the place up.
Right.
There was a pile of silt, sand, rubbish and stuff, where an eddy had swirled it into a pyramid.
Really?
Well, when I went down and the boat capsized in the water, I lost my billfold. Everything. It whipped everything right out of my clothes.
Yeah, right.
My billfold was sitting there with half of it sticking out of the pile, and I walked up and picked it up.
Really? Wow.
Would you believe that?
That's amazing, yeah.
15 feet of water and a current that was wiping the houses out, and my billfold stayed.
Got stuck in the eddy. Lucky you weren't sticking out of that mud puddle, huh? Or the sand
But
puddle.
I thought that's an odd one.
That's very, very unusual, yeah.
But we cleaned that up, and I became a one-man crew, really, for not a commissioner. I didn't call myself commissioner, but I guess that's what it would be for recreation in town.
So what would be the forerunner of like Parks and Rec department?
They now have
yes
in town. Yeah. I started cleaning that up on my own. I was out of work at the time, and I worked full-time down there, built a pavilion, built a tennis court, all of the related to water and underground and all that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was in '59.
So the Granbrook Park. Yeah.
All of Granbrook Park. Make a long story short, where I got to this, I said I'm conservative. They started adding people. We were going to have a board.
Okay.
Okay. The people that got on the board with me were from out of state,
Okay.
New York mostly, and wanted everything like right now, and the way you get it is you hire somebody to do everything for you.
Right.
And I was against hiring everybody. Volunteer, do it yourself. I was.
Right, yeah.
And long story short, I didn't get along because I didn't see eye to eye with them.
Okay.
So I got out.
Initially there was, the houses down there, wasn't there some sort of dam or something there that broke?
Yeah.
Where was that in relation to the park today?
Above where the railroad track.
So further
crossed.
upriver, there was a dam, and what was that dam for? Was there a factory there, or some?
That I don't know.
So the dam and were there houses around whatever it formed? It wasn't. It seems to me that it was almost like we had another guest on here, whose father-in-law had a cottage down there. That was a place that you actually had like summer cottages.
Most of them started as summer cottages.
Okay.
It was a beautiful brook, came down through, made a fairly large pool, what we call in the center of it,
Right.
and ambled on. And yes, around that, mostly on one side, because they did not have a bridge down there to cross the brook,
Right.
I think there were a total of 22 rings a bell with me, homes that got washed out from down there, got destroyed.
So the ones further up on the hill are still there.
They're still there, all the way. It's like a bowl.
Yeah, right.
And the ones around the rim
Yeah.
are still there, not destroyed.
So the dam prevented that flooding for a very long time, and then when it broke, it took all those houses. So it's surprising the more if they were.
Well, I guess the water came from way up, much higher somewhere.
Up Salmon Brook further?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was torrential rain. I know that's the same night that Winston got wiped out.
Right
Yeah.
down the main street.
Right.
Wiped them
There's
out.
a great documentary on public television about that, the flood
Mm-hmm.
of '55, where they document all that. It was quite a historic
Mm-hmm.
tragedy, really, in the state. Many people died.
Yeah, all over the state.
Yeah. But this part of the state, from here and west and north, seemed to get it even worse.
Yeah.
That was where it was concentrated. So so after that, there was a mess down there, I'm assuming, and you took it upon yourself to start to kind of clean it up. And how did it become town property? How did it? Because it was obviously privately owned.
It was all privately owned, and it was condemned because of the flood,
Got wiped out, basically.
and no one could build or do anything there anymore.
Right.
So the town, whether they purchased it, how they took it over, I don't know.
So it became a town
It
park.
became town property.
And you went in there and started.
We turned it into a park.
So you started cleaning it up, and you did what you could to
Yeah.
kind of do that. And then the first selectman.
Well, at that time was Norm Adams was first selectman,
Okay.
and he and I got along very well. In fact, he wanted me to be second selectman, and I refused.
Have you ever done anything else in town in terms of groups or boards? You were in the fire department.
On the fire department for many years. That's about all in town.
Right.
I don't recall, anything that would be interesting.
So you declined any further involvement on boards or commissions.
Yeah,
You
I
realized
did.
that wasn't your-
I've been approached many times for
Yeah.
various positions, but I just felt that it wasn't for me.
So when you say that you're very conservative about that sort of stuff, you're talking more about the way it's handled, the way it's done. That that you should just do it as a volunteer basis more than.
Well, today there is very little volunteerism anywhere.
Okay. Yeah.
I think you're aware of that.
It's very
Who
difficult to get
volunteers
people.
to go out and do work for
Yeah.
nothing anymore?
Right.
You
right.
got to get paid for it.
Do you think that's this is an interesting conversation, but do you think that's a byproduct of life today? Or is it that because people are, basically, I mean, during the war you said the women worked, so it was a little different. But after the war, a lot of the women didn't work as much, and when they had children, they stayed home.
Yeah.
And that's really not financially viable anymore for a lot of people. And maybe it is. Maybe it's just because we've expanded our appetite to the point where we need more.
Well, I think it's both.
Okay, yeah.
I think probably many of the families today are living beyond their means,
Okay.
whether it be one income or two.
Mm-hmm.
They're accustomed to that, and they go just a little beyond it. They
Right.
stretch it to the limit.
Right.
Those that are living on the one income are doing just as good as those that are living on two, because they're both at the peak.
So you're right. We've it's a tendency to push that out. I call it the fishbowl theory. You take a fish and you put him in a bigger bowl, he gets bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my business, people come in with a budget to buy something, and they usually push it just a little past that.
Just a little.
Yeah, so that's the type of conservatism you're talking about, the ability to kind of live within your means. Yeah. And in your park experience, you saw that kind of happened fairly
It
quickly.
wasn't going to happen.
Right, right.
And it hasn't.
Right. So you have, if you were to, if you had one wish for the town of East Granby, something that you could do, Chick gets one wish to be granted for the town, what would it be? I mean, this is kind of a broad question.
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, we've had I could give you some background. We've had people say that they would build a beautiful new school. Other people have said that they would make a big park for all the kids to play. Just keeping in mind, this isn't costing you anything.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Of course, maintaining it would, but if there's anything that you would change or different, we had somebody say something along the lines of they would like to see more development in the center, like a real store or a restaurant. I think one person brought up a real good, like a banquet center for the center of town, something that was more of a community restaurant, say.
Something like that would be nice, but I don't believe the town could support it.
It's a small town. Yeah.
It isn't ready for something like that yet.
It's a wide open question. Don't feel you have to. But is there anything that you would change? That you would, if you could just do if you could bring it back to 300 people, would you do that? Or 500 people? Or
Nothing comes to mind immediately.
Right. Well, feel free to inject if it pops in your head. You mentioned earlier that your family, and I just want to jump back for a second, your family goes way back in town. Was there any sense, you mentioned that people would come in from the outside, was that a sense amongst most of the people in town? Do you think that was a general sense that as new people moved in, there were a lot more demands and expectations of the town? So the old timers, no offense, but the people that were here were set in their ways and pretty much wanted to keep it the way it was.
That is just about it.
Okay.
I think you've hit it very closely.
Okay.
And old timer just about describes it.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
It's the people that were here originally, raised on their farms. Now you have the influx of, I call them city people, which they all come from the cities and taken over.
Right.
Nothing is the same. It's changed completely.
Yeah. Is there anything that I think initially it's got to be quite a culture shock on both sides, the people coming in. But do you think it's improving? Do you think there's a sense that there's a little bit more acceptance? I mean, obviously,
it's improving. Yes.
Yeah, some of the old timers are probably becoming more acclimated to the neighbors and vice versa.
Most of them have probably passed on now.
There you go.
All right.
That's one way to hasten change.
Attrition.
Anyway, yeah. So if you were, it sounds like you enjoyed most of your time here, though, even though you haven't.
Yes, I've had a good life.
Yeah.
I really have.
Yeah. Do you remember? This is unusual for me because I've never had anybody that spent their whole life in town. But is there any story that you can remember from when you were younger, or even as your the older members of your family would share with you? Anything that you wanted to that always stood out, or any event in town that they talked about, or
Nothing that I can recall,
Right.
stands out.
I mean, the whole story around the war it's pretty dramatic time. You were young and everything was fresh. So now, when you had you worked at these you went from those three different. Where did you spend the majority of your career after that? Did you stay at Combustion?
I left Combustion and retired.
Okay.
I had had a heart attack, so I recovered and retired from Combustion. I part-time here and there a little bit just to pick up a little income. I worked for Mark's Auto Cycling over there for a while,
Okay.
on the road.
A driver.
Nothing that you can say, to hold a job.
Right.
But my wife also retired, and between what we had invested and saved, we were able to get by until I could draw Social Security,
Right.
which is getting very, very thin these days.
Cost of living keeps going up, doesn't it?
Cost of living goes up, but they don't. We didn't get a COLA this year.
There was no increase. Yeah.
Nothing.
I think you will next year, because I think things are.
They said for 2 years.
2 years? Oh, is that the way they project it? Yeah. The cost of a lot of things is falling flat.
Yeah.
So, if you were going to give advice, this is the question I always try to close with. If you're talking to you have 2 grandchildren and 2 great grandchildren. You said. If you were to talk to a young person today, what advice would you give them?
Financially, you mean?
Regardless, yeah.
Well, of course, that's the biggest subject right now.
That's probably, it's a big one, isn't it?
If they're making enough to survive and still have a little over, I would tell them to try and get it invested in something that would pay off for them when they're 60, 70 years old.
Invest.
Save.
Save.
That's what saved me right now.
Right.
Of course, the IRAs and all that. I would not be able to stay with the cost of living anywhere near on just, well, it's not meant to be. Social Security is only
Right.
a supplement.
Supplement, yeah.
And a very small pension. Back then, when I was working, pensions didn't amount to much.
Right.
Not like they do today.
So your advice would be primarily financial, and pay attention to your finances, and make sure that you provide for your future.
That and lay off the cigarettes and alcohol and dope and
Live a clean life and
drugs.
save some money.
That's about it. I mean, what else can you say?
Hey, you don't get to 82 years old without following some of that advice yourself. So.
Yeah. The only thing I did was I did smoke, but I
Yeah.
gave that up way back. I had my first heart attack, and the doctor said, you want to keep living? Quit smoking.
I think that what's lost on today's generation oftentimes is the fact that almost everybody smoked at a point in the 50s or 60s.
Well, around here, especially when you're on a farm,
right.
the first thing you do when you're kids is you go out and you grab a leaf of tobacco and you roll it up,
Yeah.
dry it, and you smoke it.
Right.
8, 10 years old.
Right.
You get sick. Oh, you turn green. But you do it.
Right.
And that's where it starts.
Right.
There was no... You didn't get caught doing it because you were disciplined.
Yeah. Right.
But every kid had to try it.
Typical youthful.
Well, today you don't have the tobacco and you don't have the corn silk and things that we experimented with kids.
Right.
You have cigarettes.
Right.
They become addicted immediately to cigarettes.
Yeah. Yep, they've done a lot to try to cut that down. But well, it's been a pleasure having you here. If you have any friends or family that you sound like you have a pretty extensive network in the area. But it's been a pleasure having you here tonight, and I appreciate you sharing your memories of the town and what some of your experiences here. And like I said, it's a very informal conversation. We're just trying to get as much on tape as we can.
Well,
And,
I wished I could recall more for you.
No,
Right
you
off the
did
top
great.
of my head is,
everybody brings something different. You never know where it's going to end up, and that's kind of why I enjoy doing it that way. So, thank you for joining us this evening. And our guest, Chic Viets, has been our first guest in 6 weeks. So we're trying to keep our interviews going, and if you know of anyone who's interested in sharing their stories of their time in East Granby, feel free to submit their name to GCTV. It's gctv16.org, and you can go to their website and contact us through there. If you have, once again we thank our viewers, and we thank the volunteers that make this possible, and we wish you all a very happy holiday season, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Good night.